Hi there, I'm Eleanor Royce, 29 years old from Connecticut, born into a prestigious family of bankers and politicians. Royce and Partners, our family's financial firm, has existed since the Civil War. My older brother went to Stanford, my sister graduated from Yale, and me, I chose to study design thinking at a small arts college in Oregon. My family called me the dreamer. My father said bluntly, "There's no room in this family for silly startup nonsense." This is my true story, one I've never shared before. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because your dreams didn't fit someone else's blueprint, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because I'm about to tell you how I turned being cut off into the most powerful decision of my life. I stood in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and centuries of family legacy, as every single member of my family turned to stare at me like I had just committed a crime. Moments earlier, I'd been cut out of the Royce family will, publicly, coldly, as if I had never belonged in the first place. The silence was suffocating. My father had just announced it with the same tone he used when discussing interest rates: detached, calculated, final. My mother didn't even flinch. She simply sipped her champagne and looked past me like I was a shadow. My siblings glanced at each other with smug relief, as if this decision had been a long time coming. And then my phone rang. It buzzed once, then twice. I reached into my clutch, my heart pounding, not out of fear, but something else, something rising. I saw the caller ID. It was my assistant, Rebecca. She only calls during emergencies or milestones. I answered. "Miss Eleanor." Her voice was steady, but I could hear the adrenaline beneath it. "Goldman Sachs just confirmed the Series B investment is through. Final valuation, $120 million. I didn't move, didn't breathe. For a second, I just stared at the air in front of me, the chandelier lights sparkling like stars I could finally touch. And then I smiled. Across the table, my mother's glass froze halfway to her lips. My father narrowed his eyes. My brother's smirk faded. My sister tilted her head, confused. They had no idea what just happened, but I did. That was the moment I won. And not because of the money, but because I had done it without them. Without their name, without their help, without their approval. I built something they never even bothered to ask about. And now it was bigger than any of them could ignore. Let me take you back, because you need to understand how we got here. My name is Eleanor Royce. I'm 29 years old, born into one of the oldest banking families in the Northeast, Royce and Partners, established during the Civil War, built by men who wore top hats and thought women existed only to decorate the dinner table. My father, Franklin Royce, is a legacy man. He believes in bloodlines, board seats, and the unspoken rule that success is only valid if it comes in a navy blue pinstripe suit from an Ivy League institution. My brother went to Stanford, my sister Yale. Both now work inside the gilded fortress that is the Royce Empire. Me? I went to a design school in Oregon. I studied human-centered systems, design thinking, empathy-based tech. Things my father calls non-essential hobbies. I left the East Coast with a suitcase, a laptop, and the kind of fire that only comes when you've been told your whole life that you are less. While they bought apartments in Tribeca and Hampton's cottages, I lived in a shared flat with 3 roommates and a broken heater. I coded through the night, fueled by instant noodles and a refusal to give up. That's how PathLight was born, an AI platform that helps low-income workers navigate legal contracts, workplace disputes, and labor rights without needing a lawyer they can't afford. My vision was simple. No one should get fired, exploited, or silenced just because they can't understand the language of the law. When I pitched the idea to my family over dinner 3 years ago, my father laughed. My mother asked if I was dating anyone more realistic. My brother said I was going through a phase. They said no one needed that kind of software. They said I should come home, work in the family office, learn how real business is done. Instead, I built my own business, bit by bit, grant by grant. I taught myself to fundraise. I pitched to rooms full of men who looked like my father and thought like him too. I was rejected 47 times before I found my first angel investor, an ex-union organizer turned VC who said, "You're building what no one else has the guts to." 8 months later, PathLight was live in 2 states. 1 year after that, it was helping 18,000 users, and tonight, it became a $120 million company. So when my father looked at me across that long oak table, flanked by oil paintings of ancestors and a wine collection older than I am, and said, "Eleanor will no longer be part of the inheritance," I didn't flinch, because I already had something more valuable than their money. I had independence, purpose, impact, and now I had leverage. What came next? You'll want to stick around, because what happened after that phone call, it wasn't just revenge. It was justice. And it's a moment I will never forget. I'm Eleanor Royce. I'm 29 years old, and this is the part of my life I've never told anyone. Not even my closest friends. Until now. I was born in Connecticut into a family where legacy is everything. My last name, Royce, isn't just a name, it's a brand. Royce and Partners, the family's financial firm, has been around since the Civil War. My great-great-grandfather helped write the earliest drafts of our state's banking regulations. There's even a portrait of him hanging in the state capitol building. In our family, success isn't just expected, it's scripted. My older brother, Charles, went to Stanford, full ride, double major in economics and political science. He's now a managing director at our family's firm, and his wedding made the front page of the Connecticut Chronicle. My sister Victoria went to Yale, pre-med, Harvard for medical school. Now she runs a biotech company partially funded by our father's network. Elegant, brilliant, and perpetually praised. And then there's me. I chose to study design thinking at a small progressive arts and tech school in Oregon. Barely on the family's radar unless it was to criticize me. I remember the look on my mother's face the day I told her. She said, "You mean design like interior decorating?" My father didn't even look up from his tablet. He muttered, "This family has no space for whimsical ventures. You're throwing away the Royce name for some startup fantasy." From that day, I became the dreamer. The one they talked about in polite tones during fundraisers. The one they mentioned only if someone else brought me up first. But what they didn't know, what they never cared to know, was what I was building. While my siblings hosted charity galas, I was eating ramen noodles at 1 a.m., running beta tests on my laptop, in a rented studio apartment with leaky pipes and a heater that only worked if you kicked it. I was building something that didn't just look good in a pitch deck. It solved a real problem. The problem? Tens of thousands of people in this country sign contracts, leases, job offers, NDAs, or termination letters without understanding a word of legal language. They don't have access to lawyers, they can't afford consultations, and they get exploited every single day. So I created PathLight, an AI-powered platform that translates legalese into human terms. It doesn't just simplify, it educates. It empowers people to know their rights, ask the right questions, and push back when something doesn't feel right. I didn't do this to make headlines. I did it because someone needed to. Because when I was 21, a friend of mine got fired from her job while pregnant, and she didn't know she could fight back. She signed the release papers in tears, thinking it was over. No one helped her. I remember holding her hand that night and thinking, we deserve better than this. That moment never left me. So when my family asked why I wasn't coming home for Christmas 3 years in a row, it wasn't because I was lost. It was because I was building something worth finding. I bootstrapped everything, learned how to code, how to pitch, how to lose gracefully and start over smarter. I got rejected so many times I lost count. I heard phrases like cute idea, noble cause, and not fundable more often than my own name. But then something clicked. One VC, a woman who had grown up watching her immigrant parents get taken advantage of, said yes. She invested the first $100,000. That money gave me room to breathe, to hire one engineer, to finally test our MVP with a pilot group. In 6 months, we had 2,000 users. In a year, 30,000. The testimonials poured in. Workers using PathLight to push back against illegal wage cuts. Single moms using it to renegotiate leases. Teenagers helping their parents understand what a medical waiver really meant. But I never told my family. Not because I was hiding it out of shame, but because I already knew what their reaction would be. They wouldn't ask how many people I helped. They'd ask when I planned to get a real job. That's what always stuck with me. The way they could praise Charles for a $20 million fund acquisition that would generate fees for already rich clients, but they never once asked why I skipped Thanksgiving 3 years straight. I wasn't backpacking through Europe. I was building something that mattered. And the thing is, part of me still wanted them to notice. Still wanted my father to call and ask, "What are you working on, really?" Still wanted my mother to brag about me at her charity luncheons. Still wanted Victoria to text me, "I'm proud of you." They never did. But then came that dinner, that moment, and that phone call. And everything changed. Now, maybe they'll want to hear the rest. But for the first time in my life, I'm not telling this story for them. I'm telling it for you, for anyone who's ever been dismissed, misunderstood, or pushed aside for dreaming different. Because sometimes the dreamers are the ones building the future. And sometimes legacy is something you choose to create, not something you inherit. I moved to Seattle with 2 suitcases, a secondhand laptop, and exactly $426 left in my checking account. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my family, not even the few mentors who had once politely suggested I take a corporate job just for stability. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want opinions. I just wanted a chance to breathe on my own. Seattle was gray, cold, wet in ways that sank into your bones. But it was also quiet, anonymous, and full of other people trying to build impossible things. I rented a tiny room above a laundromat that smelled perpetually of detergent and mildew. The window barely closed, the radiator clanged at night like it was haunted, and the shower had one setting: ice. But it was mine, and it was enough. During the day, I freelanced just to stay afloat. UX audits, site redesigns, anything that paid. But every night, from 8 p.m. until 3 a.m., I sat at a folding desk I'd found on Craigslist, coding the early prototype of what would become PathLight. No team, no funding, no fancy accelerator, just me, and the fire that wouldn't go out. PathLight didn't begin as a product. It began as an ache, a memory I couldn't shake. 3 years earlier, a friend of mine named Tanya had been fired from her job at a hotel when she was 6 months pregnant. The manager handed her a termination letter and said, "It's not personal, we just need someone who can move faster." He told her to sign the severance form. She did. She didn't know she had rights, didn't know that what happened was illegal. She couldn't afford a lawyer. She didn't even know how to read the clause that gave up her ability to sue. That night, I held her as she cried, not just from losing the job, but from the sheer helplessness of being dismissed and not knowing how to fight. That helplessness lodged itself in my chest and never left. So when people asked what inspired me to start PathLight, I never mentioned the word innovation. I said, I want people like Tanya to never feel powerless again. But let me tell you, building something that matters when no one's watching, when no one believes in you, is the loneliest thing in the world. There were nights I cried into my laptop, nights I stared at error codes at 2:47 a.m. wondering if I was delusional. Nights I calculated exactly how many days of instant noodles I could stretch out of my grocery budget. And yet, I kept going. I wasn't chasing glory. I was chasing clarity, a working prototype, a single sentence that made the law make sense to someone who'd never had the privilege of a private attorney. When the first line of code ran properly and translated a termination clause into simple, readable language, I sat in silence and stared at the screen. Not in celebration, but in something deeper. Proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that it could be done. Proof that someone like me, who didn't go to Yale Law, who wasn't part of some Silicon Valley boys club, could build something real. But I still needed money. Server costs, testing, outreach. I pitched to 12 angel investors. 11 smiled politely and said, "It's a nice idea, but we invest in scalable solutions, not social causes." The 12th meeting changed everything. She was an ex-lawyer, mid-40s, sharp, tired eyes. She met me in a dusty co-working space downtown, looked through my deck in silence, and then said, "You remind me of me, except I didn't have the guts to quit when I should have." She'd been fired from a top law firm after reporting a senior partner for sexual harassment. Blacklisted. Silenced. She knew exactly what it felt like to watch systems protect the wrong people. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "What you're building isn't an app. It's a quiet revolution." She wrote me a check for $100,000 on the spot. I cried in the elevator afterward. Not because of the money, but because for the first time, someone saw me. That money didn't solve everything, but it gave me time. It bought me sleep. It bought me real coffee. It allowed me to hire one brilliant part-time engineer and send out our first batch of user testing links to actual workers. When the feedback came in, when people said things like, "I used your tool to negotiate a raise," or "I finally understood what I was signing," I cried again. Not from exhaustion this time, but from something close to joy. That's how PathLight really began. Not from capital or connections, but from a broken radiator, a secondhand laptop, and one woman's refusal to give up. At 28, PathLight had launched pilot programs in 3 states. We were still small, scrappy even, but real. 10,000 users, 6 legal victories directly tied to the AI-generated documentation we provided. These weren't just wins on paper. These were single moms keeping their jobs, immigrants avoiding wrongful eviction, hourly workers finally being paid for their overtime. We didn't have billboards. We didn't need them. Word spread in whispers between night shift workers, in community centers, on subreddits dedicated to labor rights. PathLight was becoming something I couldn't contain anymore. And yet, I still hadn't told my family. I'd built this company out of nothing, without their name, without their money, without even their emotional permission. And I kept it from them, not out of pettiness, but self-protection. I remembered all too well the last time I'd brought up my career path. I had just turned 24, and I told them I'd been accepted into an MBA program, but declined it to pursue PathLight full-time. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply said, "You're making a mistake that will follow you the rest of your life." My mother added, "Darling, you don't build credibility with ideas. You build it with institutions." And just like that, my courage folded in half. So I stayed silent. Every holiday, I let them believe I was working a mid-level product design job. Every time they asked about my little project, I deflected. My brother Charles would make some comment like, "Still living the startup dream?" and I'd smile politely. My sister Victoria would say things like, "It's so nice that you're doing something you're passionate about. Must be freeing not to worry about legacy." But then, one rainy Tuesday, I got the call. My father. He rarely called me directly. Normally, it was my mother inviting me to functions I had no desire to attend. But this time, it was him. "Eleanor," he said, in that clipped, authoritative tone I knew too well. "We're having a family meeting. This Friday."
"I expect you home."
No explanation, just an expectation. And somehow I knew. This wasn't optional. My mind spun. What kind of meeting required every child to return to Connecticut on short notice? Was this about inheritance? Company restructuring? A political move? I had no clue. But I did know one thing. I had outgrown the version of myself they still thought I was. This time, I would show up as the woman I'd become, not the girl they'd tried to mold. I arrived at the estate late Friday afternoon, dressed deliberately modest. Navy slacks, a simple cream blouse, no designer logos. I wore my rose gold smartwatch and carried my tablet, but I left my Tesla parked at the nearby coffee shop and Ubered the final mile in an old Toyota. I wasn't ready for them to see all of me. Not yet. But I wasn't hiding anymore either. The house was just as I remembered. Grand, cold, meticulously arranged. The scent of wood polish and power still lingered in every hallway. Victoria greeted me first, sipping from a crystal glass, her posture perfect.
"Eleanor," she smiled.
"You look rested." Charles followed, adjusting his cufflinks like he was about to pitch to the board of directors.
"Still with that startup?"
he asked. I smiled. Still building. I said nothing more. Dinner was served in the grand dining room under the antique chandelier, like always, but the atmosphere was strange, tense, controlled. My mother looked nervous, which was new. My father sat at the head of the table, hands folded, eyes steady. Then he spoke.
"We've gathered you all here tonight to discuss the future of the Royce legacy,"
he said.
"Some decisions have been made."
And as the courses began to arrive, lobster bisque, filet mignon, roasted root vegetables, I realized this wasn't just a dinner. This was an announcement. And I was about to find out what role, or lack thereof, they believed I should play in the future of the family. But what they didn't know was that I had a future of my own. And it was far bigger than any of them could imagine. The family meeting took place in the drawing room of our Martha's Vineyard estate, a place that belonged in magazines and nightmares at the same time. Crystal chandeliers, mahogany paneling, a fire crackling just enough to suggest warmth, while every conversation around it remained cold and calculated. I arrived exactly on time, but from the way my mother raised her eyebrows, you'd think I had barged in uninvited. Charles was already mid-sentence, explaining some new expansion plan for the family fund in Hong Kong. "The regulatory environment is softening," he said with his signature smirk, "which opens up massive arbitrage opportunities." Victoria followed with a polished monologue about a partnership between her biotech firm and a European pharma giant. "We're targeting orphan diseases. It's high risk, high reward," she said modestly, as if she weren't angling for a Bloomberg profile. Everyone clapped. Literally clapped. Then silence. And every head slowly turned toward me. My father cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the room like a gavel. "Eleanor," he said, "we've discussed it thoroughly. Your mother and I, along with the family board, have decided to update the trust and inheritance structure." Pause. You could have heard the champagne bubbles stop fizzing. "You will not be included among the primary heirs." He said it the way a CEO fires an intern, without drama, without eye contact, just done. My mother nodded like this was a well-rehearsed script. It's time you face reality, darling. The world doesn't run on dreams. Art and apps don't pay bills, not at the level our family operates. Art and apps. That's what she reduced my work to. Not the platform helping thousands understand their labor rights. Not the software that had already won awards. Not the tool that HR departments across 3 states had quietly started using. Just art and apps. I didn't say anything right away, because in that moment, I wasn't sad. I wasn't shocked. I was furious. But not the kind of fury that explodes. No, this was cold rage, controlled, patient, carved over years of being interrupted at dinners, belittled at holidays, and treated like a failed experiment in the Royce gene pool. I looked across the table. My brother sat back, pretending to be neutral, but his lips twitched with satisfaction. My sister sipped her wine, eyes glinting with that same subtle cruelty she'd used on me since we were teenagers. And my parents, who had never once asked me what PathLight actually did, just stared, waiting for me to say thank you for their decision. I smiled. That tight, infuriating kind of smile that says, "You have no idea what's coming." Then I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. And right on cue, it buzzed. Not once, not twice, 5 times. I answered without stepping away from the table. "Rebecca?" I said, keeping my voice light. "What's up?" Her voice came through crisp, excited, urgent. "Goldman Sachs just finalized the Series B. PathLight is officially valued at $120 million, and the Washington Post just requested an interview for their tech feature. Oh, and the Labor Department wants to meet with you next week." I looked up slowly. My father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother went pale. Charles dropped his fork. Victoria whispered, "What?" I stood up calmly and said, "Actually, you're right, Mother. Apps and art don't pay bills. They build empires. Excuse me, I have a call with our general counsel. We're reviewing international licensing agreements." And just like that, I walked out, leaving 4 very powerful, very speechless people in my wake.
Eleanor, it's me, Nucor CEO. Goldman Sachs just confirmed. Series B is official. PathLight is now valued at $120 million. The words came through my phone like a bullet wrapped in silk. I didn't put the call on speaker, but the room felt it anyway. My hand was steady, my voice didn't waver, but the silence that followed was so loud it felt like someone had turned off the oxygen in the room. My mother's wine glass trembled, just slightly. Not enough for her to spill, of course. Eleanor Royce Sr. never spills. But the glass shook, and her eyes lost their usual icy precision. My father blinked once, then twice. He looked at me like he was suddenly trying to recognize a language he'd ignored for too long. Charles, my older brother, the anointed heir of the Royce legacy, leaned forward, incredulous. "Wait, what? You're the CEO?" I looked him in the eye. "Not the CEO, the founder," I said, clearly, each word measured. "And I hold 53% equity." 10 seconds. That's all it took. 10 seconds to undo 10 years of being dismissed, of being the artsy sibling, the dreamer, the non-serious one, the girl who left the East Coast for Oregon and never quite came back. 10 seconds to crack through a lifetime of silence and reshape how they looked at me. No one spoke, not right away. Their brains were still catching up. I stood there, no longer their disappointment. Not someone they could mock at brunch. I wasn't asking for validation. I was stating facts, and the facts had weight now. Charles looked stunned, his lips parting like he wanted to challenge me but didn't know how. Victoria, my sister, kept blinking, her wine glass still raised halfway, frozen in a toast she never got to make. My mother finally found her voice.
Eleanor, she said, forcing a smile, that social reflex kicking in. Why didn't you ever tell us? I tilted my head, not in mockery, but in genuine curiosity. Tell you what? That the thing you thought was a hobby became a national platform used by tens of thousands? Or that the daughter you wrote out of the will is now the largest single stakeholder in a company Goldman Sachs just backed? Her smile faltered. My father cleared his throat again, this time not as a symbol of power, but as a man regaining composure. We may have misjudged the scale of your project, he said slowly. You didn't misjudge the project, I said, voice calm. You dismissed me. Victoria, finally regaining her footing, leaned in. This is amazing, Eleanor. Really. I mean, with your platform and my biotech work, we could… No, I cut in. Everyone turned. I'm not here to be repackaged into your narrative. This isn't a new family asset you've just discovered. This is mine. I built it. Without your funding, your connections, or your belief. I turned slightly toward my father. And I didn't do it to prove anything. But you should know I no longer need anything from you. Not your trust, not your approval, not your inheritance. Then I walked toward the door. Charles called after me. Are you really going to throw away this moment? After everything? I paused, looked over my shoulder. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm just finally claiming what's mine. And I walked out. 3 weeks after the dinner that changed everything, I received an email from my father. The subject line was Request for Strategic Collaboration. Short, measured, just like him. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside it read, Eleanor, I hope you are well. As you may have heard, Royce & Partners is undergoing a rapid restructuring process due to current market conditions. Given your background and your leadership of PathLight, I believe there is a meaningful opportunity for strategic alignment between your platform and the Royce legacy. We'd like to explore a partnership, perhaps even discuss integrating PathLight into our new compliance and legal innovation division. Your experience with legal tech is both timely and valuable. Let me know when we can speak. Warm regards, Dad. Warm regards. From a man who once called my startup a digital hobby. From the father who 3 weeks ago publicly removed me from the family trust because I hadn't contributed to the Royce legacy. And now? Now they were floundering. The firm had taken a series of risky, leveraged bets in East Asia that backfired. Their compliance department was under federal scrutiny. Word had spread on Wall Street. They needed help. Not from banks, not from analysts, but from me. It should have felt triumphant, and maybe it did, for a second. But mostly it felt revealing. The truth was, they never saw me until they needed me. My existence had become valuable only after it could be leveraged. I didn't respond that day. I waited. 3 more emails came in. One from Charles trying to frame it as a family unity opportunity. Another from Victoria suggesting a female-led tech angle would look good on the Royce brand. And a third, again from my father, more direct this time. Eleanor, time is pressing. We are asking not just as business people, but as your family. Let's fix this together. Fix this. As if I had broken something. I opened a blank reply window, typed, erased, typed again, and then I wrote the only thing that truly reflected how I felt. Dear Dad, thank you for your message. At this time, PathLight is not seeking partnerships with firms that do not share our core values. I sincerely wish the Royce team all the best as you navigate this difficult period. Warm regards, Eleanor. I hit send, and that was it. No drama, no anger, just clarity. Because some victories don't come with applause or champagne. They come with silence, and the knowledge that you no longer need to be part of something that once made you feel small. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the city glow beneath me, the skyline sharp and endless, and I felt it in my bones. I had not just outgrown them, I had outbuilt them. 1 year later, almost to the day, I stood at the front of a softly lit event space in Manhattan. The walls were lined with photos of young women in tech, most of them smiling, some of them shy, all of them strong. Behind me was a large banner that read Royce for Equity, my foundation, my vision, my gift to the girls I used to be. The room was full. Founders, mentors, policy advocates, community leaders, and teenage girls from underserved schools who had traveled hours to be here. They came not because of my last name, but because they'd heard that someone had created a space where they could be seen, heard, and supported, without conditions. At the back of the room, sitting in the second row, was my mother. She hadn't been at the original dinner where they cut me off. She'd let my father deliver the final blow like always, staying just enough in the background to avoid blame, but never enough to be innocent. When I invited her to the launch event, I expected her to ignore it, or worse, to send some polite regret. But she came. Quietly. Alone. I didn't go to her table that night. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. With my work, with my resilience, with this room full of women who were living proof that change doesn't ask for permission. After the speeches, after the applause, after the scholarships were announced, and the tears wiped from proud eyes, she approached me slowly. For a long second, she just looked at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. "You've done something extraordinary," she said softly. "Something I never dared to dream of. Not for you, not even for myself." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. "I see it now," she added, almost like a confession. "You didn't need the family to carry you. You built something we couldn't imagine." I still didn't answer. I simply smiled, not out of triumph, not out of revenge, out of peace. Because I was no longer seeking her praise. I no longer needed her understanding to validate my truth. I had already chosen who I wanted to be in this world, and I had become her. The girls at the event that night didn't know my full story. Most of them would never know the details of the night my family disowned me, and they didn't need to. What they saw was a woman who refused to be boxed in, who stood on a stage bearing the name that once limited her, now reclaimed on her own terms. When I walked home that night, the city lights shimmered with a quiet kind of magic. Not the loud, glittering magic of arrival, but the soft, earned glow of freedom. For the first time, I wasn't living to prove anyone wrong. I wasn't building out of spite, I was building out of purpose. Because some stories don't end with revenge. Some stories end with something even more powerful. A life lived freely, authentically, unapologetically. Sometimes being rejected is the greatest gift life can offer you. Because rejection strips away the illusion that you ever needed someone else's permission to become who you were meant to be. When the people you thought were supposed to believe in you turn away, you're left with one terrifying, beautiful truth. You are the only one who can build your future. You're the only one who can define your value. We grow up thinking approval is love, that success means applause, that being accepted means belonging. But real belonging doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't demand that you silence your voice, dim your ambition, or edit your dreams to make others comfortable.
Rejection, especially from those closest to you, hurts deeply. It carves into your self-worth in ways that can take years to rebuild. But it also sets you free. It pushes you off the path they paved for you and onto the one you carve for yourself. And that path, it's harder, lonelier, messier, but it's yours. When they doubted you, dismissed you, cut you out, remember, they didn't do it because you weren't enough. They did it because you didn't fit into the narrow shape they had imagined for you. But you were never meant to fit into their mold. You were meant to break it. To become something so uniquely, powerfully you that they wouldn't even recognize it until it was too late. So don't beg for a seat at their table. Build your own. Don't wait for their applause. Become so undeniable that silence is no longer an option. Don't ask them to see you. Become someone they can't look away from. Because in the end, your worth was never supposed to be measured by how well you pleased the people around you. It was always meant to be measured by how fiercely you stayed true to who you are, even when no one clapped, even when they walked away, even when you stood alone. And when your success finally speaks, let it say this: you didn't need their permission. You only needed your courage. I built something my family once mocked as just a computer hobby. They saw it as a distraction, not a future. But that so-called hobby now empowers thousands to understand their rights and claim their voices. And as I stood in the silence after everything unfolded, I thought of her, that young girl with quiet dreams that didn't fit anyone else's plan. If my story helps even one of those girls stand taller, then being cut off at that family dinner wasn't a loss. It was a gift. It forced me to stop seeking approval and start owning my path. Sometimes being shut out is exactly what we need to walk fully into who we are. And the most powerful reply to "you don't belong" isn't revenge, it's rising. Has your family ever dismissed your dreams, tried to write your story for you? If so, share it below. And if this message touched something in you, like, subscribe, and pass it on. You don't need to be chosen. You just need to choose yourself. That's where everything begins.